Hi, everybody. This is Dina Alexander from Educate and Empower Kids. And today we have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Tim Rarick from BYU, Idaho. He is also a member of the Educate and Empower Kids board. And so we're really happy. His specialty is fatherhood. So we are delighted to talk to him today, especially as we are gearing up for Father's Day. And I know that I have a lot of questions and I have a lot of thoughts about fatherhood, and I'm excited to talk to you. So Tim, first give us a little background. Tell us about your family. Tell us what you teach at school.
I have three, well, I should start by saying I like to study fathers and I like to talk about it. I don't know if I'm that good at doing it, but that's the nature of the beast. So I have three children. My wife and I have been married almost 19 years. And on Father's, within a couple of days of Father's Day, it'll be our 19th anniversary. We have four children, a son who's 15, and then three daughters, ages 13, 11, and, well, they're almost 13, almost 11. I'll round up, 13, 11, and 8. And I teach parenting. I teach child and family advocacy and policy, child development, and then a few other, well, those are my three main ones. And then I have had the privilege of speaking about fathers all over the world. And so that's, in fact, you mind if I just jump into how that came to be?
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't plan on this. So when I was in grad school, I was just planning on doing a marriage and family therapy. And then one thing led to another. I'll skip a lot of details. My wife says I don't have a short version, but I'm going to prove her wrong right now. One thing led to another, and then I got this position at BYU, Idaho, and within a year, my advocacy and policy work led me to the UN. That's a long story. They said, "What do you want to speak on?" It was at the Commission on the Status of Women. I'm going, okay, I'm the only guy here almost, and this is on women, and it's just kind of a stroke of inspiration. Like, you need to speak on father-daughter relationships because they care about girls at the Commission on the Status of Women. And that really just launched me into into the research deeper, and then to speaking on it all over the place. And it's been refining for me personally, and it's been very great for me professionally too, just to learn these things. So
definitely.
Yeah.
I find that everything I do,
serendipitous.
I find that everything I do here at Educate and Empower Kids has just made me a better mom. Like I already thought I was a good mom and patting myself on the back. But the more I do what I do, the more I realize how much there is to learn, and the scope and the depth and the breadth of life, that we don't always have all the answers, but we're all just doing our best. So,
right.
So when I was in the 6th grade, my parents got divorced and I lived with just my dad for 4 years. And then later on, I moved back with my mom. And I have a background in pre-marriage and family therapy, did a lot of family studies classes, took, human development, and there's a lot of varying opinions. But I think most researchers agree that in the ideal situation, kids need a mom and a dad. What does the research say? Do kids really need a dad? Do they really need a mom? I know, obviously, we all know people that have thrived, right, with just one or the other. But what does the research tell us?
Well, just to your point, Barack Obama is one who adamantly advocates for fatherhood. He was raised by a single mom. I guess you could define him as successful as the former president of the United States, 2 terms. And so I think he's a great example of someone who advocates for fatherhood without being raised by moms. And he of course, sings the praises of a single mom because she did a tremendous job. So yeah, to your point, I think we could think of many examples, maybe not as famous or as well known as Barack Obama, but there's hundreds, if not thousands of them, maybe even millions. So as far as the research goes, you're spot on. I like to use more of an analogy, and then I'll break it down. What I mean by that is, if you think about nutrition for your children, or even for us, we need protein, we need carbohydrates, we need vitamins and minerals, iron, we need vitamin C, A, D, etc. So we need all those things. And I guess metaphorically, I found in the research that moms offer a different nutrition than dads do. Cognitive nutrition, physical, really, relational nutrition, social nutrition, etc. So, for example, dads have a bigger impact on their sexual activity, moms do. Have a bigger impact on their daughters' romantic relationships. They have a bigger impact on their sons' emotional regulation. And you'll see the trend that boys or young men who are in gangs are almost always fatherless. Our prisons are full of men who grew up in fatherless homes. Not every single one of them, but an extreme disproportionate number of men who are imprisoned came from fatherless homes or father abusive homes. Right? Having an abusive father isn't really much of an upgrade of, if at all, of being in a fatherless home.
For sure.
And so children who are raised in fatherless homes are more likely to be obese. They're more likely to run trouble with the law. Girls are 7 times more likely to be pregnant than girls who are raised in father-present homes.
So that's something I'm wondering about. So as I was getting ready for this, reading, doing lots of research, that's something that came out over and over again, that kids are most likely to put off sex if dad is engaged and strong. Why is that? What's the translation there? What is it that dads provide that brings about kids, not having sex as early?
Yeah, there's the stereotype of there's a country song, and I can't remember who sings it, but it's a dad basically saying, "Oh, you like my daughter, do you now? Well, I'll be home. Just come here. I'll be home cleaning my gun." I can't remember all the lyrics, but there's that stereotype, and I think that may explain part of it, but I think it really doesn't do it justice. I think it's much more than that. So on the daughter's end, in the bioecological, or what's the term? The psychological evolutionary research, they explain this from an evolutionary perspective and say that, for example, girls who are raised in a fatherless home, their body starts to think, okay, well, puberty is the onset of being able to reproduce. And I can't reproduce and perpetuate my species or my genes if there is no protector male figure around. And so when that's not around, we find that the girls are more likely to, in those homes, to have menarche earlier, have hit puberty and go through puberty quicker, and have sexual activity younger. So I guess that's the evolutionary description. The more of the psychology description is dad set a tone for sons and daughters. Let's start with daughters. Dad sets the foundation for all future romantic male relationships. This is how a man should treat you. This is how a man should be. And if that's really bad, if it's a bad example or a no example at all, she doesn't have what one researcher calls a sexual script or romantic script to go off of. She's kind of making it up. Moms can offer a lot there, and they sure should. We see that the opposite sex parent has a tremendous impact on romantic relationships. So mothers and sons have a very similar impact too. You hear another term you hear thrown around is having mommy issues. If a boy has mommy issues, that's a very real thing, just like a daddy issues. Even though I think we may use that term too casually. So
yeah, I'm laughing because my son just turned 16. My daughter is 18, been dating a while. And we've watched these different boys come in and out, but my son has a girl at school that he likes. They've gone out on a couple dates. And when I met her, I was like, because I feel like my son is very handsome, right? A lot of women have been like, oh, he's going to be a heartbreaker and all this kind of thing. But when I met this girl, I thought, oh, she reminds me of me. Like, she's kind of quirky, very smart, very quick, can hang with the boys and the girls, not overly flirtatious, just like me, But anywho, I was kind of taken aback by it. And so hearing you say that, I'm like, I'm just laughing. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So, one more thing on that.
Go ahead.
Your son's experience. There's 2 or 3 studies I've read on, it's called sexual imprinting. And so they study these men and women and their romantic partner choices. And the stronger the bond that man had with mom and the woman had with dad, the more likely that the facial structure and I guess the likeness of the parent is to happen. I didn't explain that very well, but it explains your son's experience. The closer the bond you have with your son, the more likely he is to pick somebody that reminds him of you without him even being consciously aware of it. Like, I'm going to look for mom.
Yeah.
Because that kind of creepy for,
well, it's almost kind of like it's
many
what
young
you,
women.
it's what you understand. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it makes
Yeah.
sense. This person kind of makes sense to you
Yeah.
of what a decent human being is, let's say. It's
Right.
not so much that you're going to,
Yeah.
anybody's
So
looking for mom or dad, you know?
that's what they see. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why they call it imprinting, because it's kind of like it's imprinted on your mind what's kind of an ideal mate, whether it's physical, emotional, social. And so it's a correlationary research, right? It's not, of course, going to cause, if you have a good relationship with my daughters, they're not going to find somebody that looks just like me with curly hair. And
Yeah.
if they're not, I'm going to be offended, right? It's not like that. But there's a strong connection that can happen there. So,
and
yeah,
I could say so much about that, because like my two sisters and I all three of us have married men that are totally different than our father, look different. Right. They're all bald. All three of us have married bald men. My father has a full head of hair, but we also totally different. And that, I think, was conscious and unconsciously done. But that's a story for
probably
next
bald
time.
when you married.
Yeah. He was already balding. My husband was already balding when we were in our early 20s.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So all this research, I love what you said about how it's like a set of vitamins and minerals and nutrition of what we need, what a child needs in our development. And so hearing that, because again, a lot of us have heard that, or we studied that throughout our lives of, okay, yeah, about physical health, emotional health, intellectual health, but how is that translating in parenting in the digital age? So now that we are being surrounded by all these screens, we're spending less time together, we're overstimulated, we're a bit distracted, we're mom and dad running here and there. What is the research showing of how are mom and dad doing with all of this? Has there been any research yet of talking about who is upholding rules when it comes to screen time, or how is that being balanced with the changes in, what are, I think men today have a lot more pressure on them, not just to, say provide, but also to, be more emotionally involved, to be connected, to help out around the home more. But again, I feel like things have changed a bit with, again, the constant screen time, the constant hypersexualized culture. What does that mean for parenting these days?
Yeah, so you can look at pre-digital age and then present digital age. And even just pre-digital age, you can look at the trends in parenting style between mom and dad. There's almost always one of the parents that's the rule enforcer. Both parents should talk together, and I think they should both enforce it. But on average, and for the most part, it's typically the dads. Now, in some homes, it's reversed. It's the moms, and the dads kind of hang back. And it doesn't always mean that if one's the enforcer, the other one just sits back and is a lazy parent. It's just that dads, on average, and for the most part, seem to be the rule enforcers. And we're seeing that trend also with technology. But here's a little caveat to that. Boys, and they have been this way since the Atari and Super Nintendo or the Nintendo and all that, boys, on average, and for the most part, have, and the trend is today too, they have more likely to be addicted to video games online and game consoles like Xbox and PlayStation, etc. And girls are more likely today, daughters especially, are more likely, and women, moms too, more likely to be addicted to social media, Instagram, Pinterest, and things like that. So It's not that one doesn't ever use the other, but as far as if you look at just brain development, understand how the two sexes are different, we can also start to see how a dad is more likely to be like, you know what, that's not a big deal that he wants to play Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty to his son and maybe even play with him. And the mom's going, no, this is terrible. It's violent. I can't. And he's spending all of his life doing it. Now, does that mean every dad's that way? No, because I study the impacts of technology addiction on children a lot. That sometimes it makes me a little too paranoid, and my wife has to tell me to throttle back a little. So, yeah, we're seeing some gender differentiated in sons and daughters when it comes to social media for girls, video games for boys, and moms are more likely also to struggle with that too. There's some studies that have shown the increase of anxiety and depression in adolescent, young adult, and even adult females and males, but it tends to be even stronger on the female side the more they are viewing online social media. And this creates more comparisons. This creates more, my life isn't quite good enough. In fact, we often use screens as a way of coping. I've said it this way, that we screen our feelings. So when we're feeling some negative emotions, and parents haven't taught a child how to regulate those things, how to be mindful. There's a lot of great mindful research on it too. When they're not mindful, they'll use something, and some people will eat their feelings, and that has turned into a joke, but it's a real thing. Some people will use pornography, and some will just simply Netflix binge, or you know what I mean?
I know in this day and age, I've been wondering, as I look in my neighborhood, in my congregation, among my family members, I don't know if I know anybody who doesn't have an addiction of some kind. I definitely grew up eating my feelings, and that kind of addiction has been something I have struggled with. But for sure, that's, I think, becoming such a huge coping mechanism. And I am very vigilant about screen time with my kids, with myself. But we are going through a move right now, right? We are literally this week in the middle of packing our stuff up, putting it into pods for us to move back to New Mexico. And I have been on social media more than ever in the last 2 days, where I can feel the stress. And I have clicked over on my phone more in the last 2 days than I have probably in the last month. And that is, it's kind of sad that's, again, I mean, you can kind of say, oh, well, maybe one is better than the other. I don't know. It's kind of, again, that is something that, man, if we could figure that out, I think as parents, to get our kids and get ourselves being mindful and just setting that example. Hey, this is how I'm coping with my stress. And I do that sometimes, but I definitely can do better with that.
Me too. Me, absolutely. There's 2 quick points on that. One of them is the attachment research that came from John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth years ago used to just study the mother-child relationship, and they just tried to what would happen when that was disconnected. It wasn't until the last 10 or 20 years we started looking at the research on the impact fathers have and how fathers need to be bonded and attached. So I guess in short, we're wired to connect, but we're disconnecting wirelessly, and we're seeing societal fallouts of that. And I kind of misspoke earlier, because dads historically have been, on average, and for the most part, the rule enforcer. But what we're seeing a trend now is fathers fading further and further back into the back room. Either they're not even in the home, or they're just thinking this is the mom's job, and they feel like, well, I'm just gonna pay the bills or do the bare minimum, and
I would
so we're
say,
seeing fathers being disconnected from just family life,
and I would
even
say,
if they are there.
And I would say, when I go and I speak, I mean, just last weekend I was speaking in New Hampshire, and that is the biggest complaint I get from moms. How do I get my husband more involved in this? I'm telling my son to not have this, or I don't want our kids to have smartphones yet. And my husband is just like, oh, it's fine. Oh, you're just overreacting. Oh, you think, I had one woman say, my husband thinks I see a predator around every corner, blah, blah, blah. And so that is something that I hear you. Like, I cannot count how many moms have asked for help on that. So what would you recommend to moms to say, or women to say to their partners, say to their husbands who are really lackadaisical, either with screen time, but also just not engaged, I know, we come home from work, we're tired. What's your advice of how, we can talk to our partners more about, hey, our kids need you. Like, what are how can we positively help them feel like our kids need you, not just to play. Like, my husband has always been great with play, wrestle with the kids, all that. But I sometimes have had to say, I need you to help me, do this. So I'm not always the heavy. So I'm not always the one saying what, we got to get this done or whatever. So what would your recommendation be to?
Well, you touched on one of the reasons why I think they struggle with this, and that is, what's that? There's this old tale where a guy he found this eagle, and it was injured, and he raised it, and its whole life I thought it was a chicken or something like that, because it was raised around chickens until it was healed, and then it didn't realize its potential. It's kind of cheesy, but it's actually really powerful, the lesson. And I think dads are a lot like that eagle. Moms realize their potential more than dads do. I guess the unique power that they wield, they don't realize it.
Yes.
And so moms, I guess one of the worst things, and I understand why moms do, one of the the worst things a wife or a partner can do is to sit there and nag and nag and nag, because that will just invite more resistance from the father.
Yeah.
And I think correction and teaching is important, but if we lead with that, then we're going to erode the more important things, and we're going to shut ears down. So whether we're talking about, hey, you need to take the garbage out more, or could you please talk to little Johnny because he looked at pornography, and you have a male brain, and you've probably seen it before, help him process it. I don't want, you kidding me? He doesn't want to hear from me. So I always say start with how do you see the man? And this is going to sound philosophical, and it kind of is, but really how we see the person is more impactful than what we say to them. And if we're seeing them as an obstruction, our family would be so much happier if you would just fill in the blank. Now they're an obstruction.
Oof, yeah.
We dehumanize them, and they're just somebody who needs to be fixed. And until we fix that prideful, one book calls it a war in your heart, until you fix that, then it doesn't matter what communication style you use. It doesn't matter how you lead. You could, in fact, if you ask questions, because let's say you've learned, it's better to seek to understand before you seek to be understood. If you start with that and you haven't fixed this war in your heart, or this guy is just ruining the family, or if he would just, again, fill in the blank. Until you fix that, I might listen and learn, but I'll do it more like an attorney, where I'm leading the witness. I'm trying to get him to say what I want to say, and I'm asking him questions. Nope, that was the wrong answer, and I'll do that with my own children, right? So I would say start to change your heart of how you see him, and part of that could be, can you see his hopes and needs and dreams and fears and challenges as legitimate as your own? Can you see the humanity in him? And can you see a man who is struggling to really, what are his struggles? In fact, what are his unique challenges, burdens, trials, and pains? And then ask the question, and be honest with yourself about these questions, and say, how am I contributing to this person's challenges, trials, burdens, and pains? That if those kind of self-reflection, self-honesty questions can yield bold insights. But if we keep thinking, yeah, but they just need to change and everybody would be happier. There's one author said, seeing the other person as the problem is the problem. It doesn't mean they don't have problems. It doesn't mean they don't need to improve in some way. But you'll be blinded so much by your pride that you won't know how to help them, and you won't be able to see the humanity in them and their own challenges. Because, and I've done this to my spouse before, I've done this to my children when I just want to fix it. And so I think that's where the nagging may come from. It has more to do with here than the words you say here. And then after you start to, while you're working on that, focus on building your relationship, and just an authentic relationship with no strings attached. Reflect on which ways have you maybe seemed like you've placed conditional love. Like, I'm going to show you a physical affection or verbal affection or things like that. When you start to reciprocate, when you start to step up, that just makes the person feel more and more worthless and undesirable. There's so many media messages that trickle all the way down into our homes. And men know it. There was a study by 1,000 fathers here in the United States. And one of the questions says, being a father is very important to you. 98% said yes. I think it was 98, upper 90s. Said, yes, being a father is very important to me. And then it says, how important do you think you are to your child, in your child's life? Like, how necessary? It was just under half.
Oh.
And then how do you feel like you're being portrayed in the media? And the majority of them, we're not portrayed very well at all.
Yeah.
Anything from Homer Simpson to King of Queens, or just a Hanes commercial where I just watched it the other day, where father's dipping his son in this vat of liquid, which looks like paste. And the wife comes home and goes, "What are you doing?" "We're tired of growing out of socks, and we're tired of these things with socks. So I came up with the solution." It's almost like a Cloudy with the Chance of Meatball solution. And it's supposed to harden around his feet. And the wife goes, "That's stupid." And he gets this look on his face and he goes, "That's the future." And then she throws Hanes socks at him like, "Hey, moron." I know it gets a good laugh.
But it's annoying. It gets old.
What's that?
It gets old. It's like how, of course, and it's like this continual message, a child sees that 100 times. I mean, I saw that, I think, to some extent, but not nearly as much but when I've talked with my kids about it, they can pick out 5-10 examples right away of how media portrays fathers in a negative way. But I loved your advice. I think that is so good, not just for wives, but for husbands, for all of us as partners to think about, to take a
Yeah.
step back instead of, especially, we have summer coming. This is a time when I feel like for my family, we can kind of step back, we can calm down a little bit and look at, well, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want to, what kind of experiences do I want to have with my kids?
Hmm.
What can we create here? What can we kind of almost like build up some armor and some enforcement, some self-worth before we send them back into public school come
Yeah.
August.
Yeah.
And so I think that is just great advice, to be looking on our kids' hearts and our partners' hearts and just thinking, how can I help bring out the best in
Yeah.
them? And so,
Yeah.
Tim, any final words before we sign off today for
Well,
dads,
yeah, I
moms?
think just, well, sure. As we listen and learn from each other, we start to see each other as allies instead of enemies. And and fathers are just as important mothers. And I think one of the biggest problems we have is that it has to be an either or. Oh, here's all the great things fathers can do, and then some moms will be, oh, well, that means I'm not. No, it doesn't have to. Why can't we be equal but different? And I think that's the way research has been showing. So I think this Father's Day, we can do better by encouraging the men around us, and even if they're not fathers, and helping them. Men need praise and positive feedback just as much as women do, even though men may not let you on or let you think that they need that, but they need that. So this Father's Day, I think we can all do a little bit better about how we speak about men and fathers and seeing each other as allies. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for coming by. And thanks for watching Educate and Empower Kids. If you haven't had a chance, check out our newest book. It's called Conversations with My Kids, 30 Essential Family Discussions for the Digital Age. Tons of great information, great discussions, a great book for the summer. So thanks a lot,
I second
everyone.
that.